You do have politicians that are basically going up on stage and essentially saying that there is a divide within the immigrant community of people who do deserve to have their status resolved and people who don't.
Now, you have to come up with a humane solution to people that have been here for many years and they've raised their children and all that, and they're productive people. But we have a lot of unproductive people that are bad people, and we got to get them the hell out. We're getting bad ones out. Those are the ones they go first. But we have some bad hombres here, and we're going to get them out. We're getting really bad dudes out of this country.
There's this idea that like the bad immigrant is the criminal, the potential terrorist, potential welfare recipient that is basically draining the resources of the country. The good immigrant very much being that model minority citizen that is able to pull themselves by the bootstraps.
New Yorkers are making it clear. Ours is a city of immigrants. Our nation is a nation of immigrants.
I think when people think about, this good versus bad immigrant narrative, it's not something that's explicitly talked about in this way, but you do see it in the everyday lives of people. My name is Denise Romero. I go to school at LaGuardia Community College, which is a CUNY school. And I work for MFY Legal Services, which is a legal service organization for low-income New Yorkers. And I'm also a member of the International Socialist Organization. I consider myself a socialist. I am originally from Mexico. I live in Jackson Heights, Queens. I migrated here with my parents and my brother. We are all undocumented. My dad became a construction worker here in the U.S., has worked as a day laborer. My mom found work in factories.
This is my mom. And this is my mommy. This is Isca.
The economy in Mexico was generally declining and there were basically no jobs. This is like in the middle 90s in Mexico, which was after the signing of NAFTA. So there was a huge recession that took place. At the same time that my parents were out there looking for work, there was also like an increasing violence because of the drug war. And so I think that plus, not being able to get a job with a living wage or part of a union was really what led my parents to migrate here. And just remember that as soon as I got here and 9/11 happened, the climate in general seemed to be very suspicious of immigrants all of a sudden. And 9/11 actually happened right on my first day at school, and I was in the 5th grade, and I remember I was in class for maybe 15 minutes, and it actually really affected us because we were in a new country, we didn't understand anything, and we really just remember a lot of chaos. When I first moved to New York City, I arrived in Jackson Heights. It was a huge Mexican community. It was full of immigrants. I mean, it's the immigrant capital of the world. And so for me, I think was really good to just, you almost live in a bubble where, because I was in bilingual class and I lived in Jackson Heights, I was able to communicate and was able to kind of, be part of the community. We knew we were undocumented. We knew that you know, we were different from other people, that we shouldn't talk to administrators or teachers or police officers, we shouldn't get in trouble because of our status, because could always get deported. That was something that my mom always made us aware of, especially me being the older sibling. It was in high school when I started to realize that being undocumented was going to affect me in a lot of ways, that I actually started flundering in school. You know, you just don't find a reason to finish high school if there's not going to be any doors open for you. It became very clear to me by my sophomore year that I wasn't going to be able to go to the colleges that I had hoped to go to, which were Ivy Leagues and culinary schools. I really wanted to be a chef for a long time. I ended up actually joining an after-school program called Global Kids that is kind of a civic engagement after-school program that really has a social justice lens to it. And so they had a program about human rights. Actually, how I got involved with activism as a whole and started really learning about immigrant rights and our political system, our economic system, and how it's all connected and very much affects all of us.
Mi nombre es Denise Romero, yo también soy parte de la Organización Socialista Internacional. Y estamos aquí porque ya es tarde, vamos a tratar de mantenerlo corto.
But there has to be a decriminalization of immigrants as a whole, and they should be all given their right to work, you know, documented. A lot of undocumented people got caught up in the criminal justice system precisely because immigration is a civil issue in this country. And so for undocumented immigrants, things that for U.S. citizens would be considered misdemeanors, for undocumented immigrants are aggravated felonies, which immediately, because of the collaboration between police and ICE, makes you a target for deportation. This is at a time when broken windows policing in New York City was kind of full on implemented throughout all boroughs. And so that was at the height of stop and frisk, where, you know, the police was literally just meeting their quotas by racially profiling youth of color, particularly men. In 2011 became the year where I was deemed a good immigrant because I was able to graduate high school, go on to college with honors, whereas my brother, who from very early age was put in this other track, became this bad immigrant. When immigration policy became that we needed to deport all of the problematic immigrants, all of the bad immigrants, he became a target, and he was put in deportation proceedings after a series of stop and frisk contact with police. You know, and when we're talking about his contact with police, we're talking about jumping a turnstile, we're talking about hanging out at the park late at night and somehow that becoming trespassing private property. We have seen mass deportation, mass criminalization of all immigrants that is actually, you know, affecting people on a very personal level. When you have grown up with your brother in the same household, living the same life, and for some reason, you know, when it comes to this policy, you essentially become separated from him and told that he deserves it because he wasn't able to jump through the hoops that American society imposes on us as well as I have. Something that had to do a lot more with the support that I was offered, the networks that I was offered, than who I am as a person. Me and my brother, we are of the same kin, we are of the same blood, we live the same life, but for some reason he's deemed a criminal element in this country when it was this country that completely failed him
so that he didn't have to be in this situation. It's something that's insidious and that people don't recognize unless they're living it. And in the undocumented immigrant population, something that has affected in one way or another every single immigrant family that I've met.
Hello everyone, I'm Beto from Campaign for American Dream.
And I'm Javier from Colorado Organized Resist Escalate.
And if you're watching this, this is our 5th day inside the Obama for America campaign office in Denver, Colorado.
We have been on hunger strike for 89 hours, asking President Obama to issue an executive order that will stop deportations of undocumented youth.
DACA was won through a struggle of militant younger immigrants who are still around and who will mobilize to protect the things that they have won.
They are Americans in their heart, in their minds, in every single way but one. On paper, effective immediately, the Department of Homeland Security is taking steps to lift the shadow of deportation from these young people. Eligible individuals who do not present a risk to national security or public safety will be able to request temporary relief from deportation proceedings and apply for work authorization.
And so he was granted DACA after a really long community campaign to stop his deportation. And currently that's the only thing that's stopping him from being deported. I can't say for myself that I'm focused on the future right now. Under Obama, a lot of the limitations of DACA had already affected me. I lost my job because my renewal didn't come in fast enough and was unemployed for 6 months. It was extremely hard to finally be able to start a job, a 9-to-5 that's part of my career, where I have benefits, where I can finally access some sort of health care through my employment authorization card, where I can finally, seek some mental health services that I've needed for a really long time following the deportation case that my family dealt with. And so that sense of mobility, of attainment, of achievement was completely snatched away. And from one second to the next, you're back where you were at 5 years ago when you were broke as hell, couldn't find any job anywhere because nobody will take your fake social security card or your tax ID to work, but you still have to make your rent, you still have to make your payments. I had recently moved out of my house as this was happening. And so, that's where people's lives and the milestones that they could potentially enjoy are not an option.
In my life, when I wasn't so busy protesting everything, I would be an artist. But the one thing I don't have is time.
People who were advocating for DACA knew that DACA couldn't be the end-all for the immigrant rights movement because it is so conditional, because it only applies to a certain number of people. Towards the end of last year, when Trump's presidency seemed more and more real, and also because my grandfather was very sick, my maternal grandfather, I had begun a process to apply for advanced parole. I had never met my grandfather and probably wouldn't get the chance to see him if he didn't get any better. I went ahead and tried to apply for advanced parole, but advanced parole, like many other forms of relief in the immigration system, are, to the discretion of ICE and to the discretion of USCIS. I, like a lot of people that I know, were rejected. And one of the things that the USCIS staff person said to me was that she just didn't think that my father's terminal
chronic illness was an emergency enough. And when we tried to appeal to her and say that we probably wouldn't get the chance to apply again if Trump got elected, she implied that I was taking advantage of the system and that one thing had nothing to do with the other. My grandfather passed away. My grandfather passed away a couple of weeks after I got rejected. And it triggered a mental breakdown that I'm very much still dealing with. And I, like a lot of people that I know who have gotten rejected for similar reasons and who have walked into this new year with more loss, with more rejection, with more marginalization. I think that for a lot of us, there is no future. There is just making sure that we're still alive, that if the chance comes that we can see our family, that we are still here and that we're still whole and that we have some sort of sense that things will get better. So for now, I think that, like a lot of people, I'm trying to find some meaning in all of this by getting involved, by making sure that people are getting organized and starting to resist and starting to challenge all of these policies, but also the logic behind them. Because until we do that, we're gonna have arbitrary policies that are not ever going to take into consideration people's actual lives.
What about the law-abiding majority? That's
now
the
you have
question.
people that came in illegally, and they're called illegal immigrants, and they're here illegally. They're going to have to go, and they're going to have to come back in legally. Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. We're going to build a wall. It's going to be built. The executive order gets rescinded. One good thing
You'll rescind that one too?
One good thing
You'll rescind the Dream Act executive order.
You're going to have to. DACA. We have to make a whole new set of standards. And when people come in, they have to come in.
So you're going to split up families.
Chuck,
you're going to deport children.
Chuck, no. We're going to keep the families together. We have to keep the families together.
But you're going to keep them
they have
together
to
out?
go. But they have to go.
What if they have no place to go?
We will work with them. They have to go.
I think for myself, living in the Trump era has really meant that, yes, to some extent, all of the fears that have always been there and all the insecurities about our future that have always kind of lingered are very much amplified because of how quickly his administration is moving to implementing these goals. I am at a loss for words when people ask me what my hopes for the future are. Because according to this country right now, I don't have one. My future is to be deported if he is successful.
Down, down with deportation!
One of many migrant populations in Woodside and in Queens. And we are here today to defend our communities. Oh, yeah! They put profit over people. That shit ain't right.
When he criminalizes immigrants as people who are taking advantage of the country, who are taking advantage of our economy, or of all of these benefits that the state gives us, he's creating a narrative where people's actual needs as human beings are not part of the equation.
Or my grandpa.
Both the Democrats and the Republicans very much accepted and reiterated this idea that only the good immigrants deserve to have any sort of relief, and that the bad immigrants needed to massively and streamlinedly be deported. And this is what this framework does, is that it keeps the conversation within this narrow confines of criminality, of exclusivity, rather than challenging even what the border system is. I mean, what is the border system in a globalized capitalist world where, you know, businessmen are able to trade their commodities across borders with no sort of fines, with no sort of, rigid requirements, but human beings are then subjected to body searches, to detention centers, to death at the border because we want to protect some sort of homeland security. And that is what this framework does, that we're not talking about the global economic crisis that is driving people in the thousands to take dangerous journeys across borders to meet their needs or to escape war, but that we are instead talking about who deserves or doesn't deserve to be punished for making that hard decision of escaping their homeland. And then also the effects of US foreign policy. I mean, I'm from Mexico, and I say this jokingly, but I'm a NAFTA baby. I am literally the consequences of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and the effects that it had on Latin America's economy, and the poverty that it very much imposed on people in Mexico, my young parents included. I think seeing the reaction from people, I think that that's the only thing that's keeping me hopeful. Anticapitalista, anticapitalista, anticapitalista.
Mic check! Mic check! Mic check! Mic check! Mic check! Mic check!
The three of us here will be...
If my DACA doesn't get renewed or my brother's deportation is reactivated, that we can mobilize people to stop it. Across the country and across boroughs, there are groups that are forming to do that work, because that is the work that's going to keep people here, and that's going to give us the political and organizational ability to challenge the logic behind Trump's policies.
Para familias inmigrantes aquí en Jackson Heights, para empezar a demostrar en contra de las deportaciones si están interesados. Esta marcha es para lo de la huelga del 1 de mayo en Jackson Heights. Ah, ok, gracias. También esta marcha es para eso. Ah, bueno, gracias.
The group that I'm a part of that's being formed in Jackson Heights, you know, we don't even have a name yet, but when we talked about the principles of the group, the first thing that came up was that we will stand in solidarity and against the deportation of anyone, regardless of their criminal background, on the principle that we believe no human being is illegal. I think that that's something that wasn't very much a mainstream slogan of the immigrant rights movement up until now, but that it should be and that it can be. Because no one really is illegal as a human being in this world, but certain politicians have just created these narratives that made it so that we accept such a thing.